that stand, let my people go. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Richard Perkins, and we're here at the Port Arthur Library, and I'm about to do a presentation on the history of the Negro spirituals. I'm a classical singer, classically trained at Prairie View A&M University. I also studied bel canto music in Spoleto, Italy, and from there I went to Bayreuth, Germany. I've done opera in several cities, Denver being one of those cities that I lived in for 19 years, and sang with Opera Colorado. As I said, I'm a classically trained singer, sang in New York City, went to New York City on one of the young artist programs from Prairie View A&M University. So right now we're about to embark upon the presentation of the history of the Negro spiritual. Some years ago I found that there was a need for classical singers to continue to do the singing of our native, which is an American art form that we brought from West Africa, some of us, our ancestors, and during the Middle Passage. We'll talk a little bit about the Middle Passage and how we got here. There will also be a presentation from Mr. Patterson, I think his name is, from Fisk University, that he did at the Stafford House in Maryland. He talks a little bit about how the 20 slaves were brought here, teenagers from West Africa, and they were here. They came in 1619. That's the first recorded group of Africans that came as slaves to the United States, the continent here. As I said, I'm Richard Perkins, Jr. I dropped the junior after my father died, so there wasn't any confusion as far as my name is concerned. I've done programs here at the library in Port Arthur for the past couple of years. Paul Robeson being one of my idols and one of the people that I've been coined to sound like. Hopefully we'll be able to do a little bit of singing today during this presentation. So thank you so very, very much. For those of you that are in attendance, I want to thank Mr. L.D. Ray for doing this interview with me. This is quite a blessing and a pleasure. I hadn't anticipated being interviewed. I've been interviewed for the past few weeks leading up to this program. So unfortunately, those of you that can't be here, he may be able to capture some of these moments of my presentation, the history of the Negro spiritual. And I believe that it's necessary to keep this idiom of music alive. As Alex Haley did when he wrote Roots, he recounted a lot of the things that he heard from the elderly people around him. So many of my stories came from my grandmother, who was a resident of Rayne, Louisiana. And my great-grandmother was a child in slavery. And so thank you so very, very much, Mr. Ray, for having me as an interviewed person. And let me get started with my program, okay? Thank you so very, very much. You have a blessed evening. Put you guys to work. They've already laid out everything. Okay. I'm going to get you to open us in prayer. I see they've got a mic here, but I've got a big enough voice to where that I don't really need a microphone. Being a classical singer, microphones was not a thing that we used. we wanted the natural voice to be heard. And if you go to classical concerts or opera, you'll see the microphones way up in the air. But I can remember when I started singing opera, there were no mics. First of all, let's get started with a prayer. I don't like to do anything without the honorable man of Port Arthur, a greater Port Arthur, Mr. Thurman Bill Barty. I see he's got his fraternity covered. One of the people that keeps my heart, other than God, that keeps my life moving forward. I met this person 17 years, Krista Coffey. He is so important to me in organizing things like this program and the program I did last year at the Port Arthur Library. In the preparation, she was up last night running back and forth from my man cave to where I sat and watched television, asking me questions and getting this order of program together for years. Since I left Port Arthur and went to Prairie View, I found myself being the only African American. Prairie View, I was a 1964 Lincoln High School graduate. And somebody asked me, L.D. Ray asked me, how did I get interested in opera? And that was only because of Dr. Verley Mitchell, that was the choir director at Lincoln High School. When I graduated from high school, the next day, we graduated on a Friday, the next day, I was on the bus, Benny Woods and I, going to Baylor University to a music workshop, which entailed classical music. Benny was a musician, he was an instrumental musician. He played French horn and piano. I make a joke about it. I took 2 college entrance examinations. I took the ACT test, and I took and I took the SAT test. The ACT was for Baylor University, the SAT was for Prairie View. And I ended up at Prairie View, only because of that music department that was there. And they would come once a year and try their concert out before they would go on the road for the national tour, which lasted usually 3 weeks to a month. How important that book was to African American travelers. There was just only certain motels that we could stay in for housing. There was only certain places that we could eat for, for sustenance. And I remember, and I always asked myself, why was it when we went on national tour that we was always housed in people's houses? We very seldom stayed in a hotel. I think one particular time we stayed in San Francisco, we was at a YMCA. They put us up there. But hotels was not a thing that the Prairie View Acapella Choir enjoyed. I don't want to talk too much about Richard Perkins because hopefully and prayerfully after this program is over and I can settle back in my recliner or go back to my man cave, I can complete my autobiography entitled, You Just Don't Want to Know. And this the title is taken from a church hymn by Reverend Winey. He does that song, and I saw it on YouTube, and I said, this is the title. But I've got some interesting stories. God has blessed me to be in some circumstances that if it hadn't been for music, I tell people the voice found me. I didn't particularly think that when I was born that I would be a singer, but that's what I've done for the major part of my life, has been surrounded with music and singing. And I was telling L.D. Ray that when I started singing, I was a tenor. And by the time I entered college, I was a bass baritone. And by the time I finished and went to New York and sang on with the Young Artist Program and went to Europe, I came back as a basso profundo. And so we'll get started with this. When they were coming up, my great-grandmother was a child in slavery. And I learned some interesting stories. I also want to thank, before I get too far, I want to thank Stephen Williams and the staff that he has here at the Port Arthur Library. They have been so gracious and kind to me this book that you see setting up here was given to me during the Zachary Baroque Jazz Festival one year. And all this information, I'm just amazed about some of the information, some of the pictures that they have of me in these choirs in high school. And I don't have any of these photographs, passing on the knowledge about the Middle Passage and how we arrived here as slaves during one of these dark periods in American history. Like myself, who had to leave this area and go off someplace else to pursue my career of singing. There was no opera company. Well, there was an opera company over in Beaumont, but a very small group, and I think our mayor did Showboat with them. He sang the Old Man River, which is one of my, which is, I don't see Bay Lewis in here today, but when Bay Lewis comes in, wherever I am, Bay Lewis wants me to sing Old Man River. Man. And so Bay is not here, but I charge him too, Thurman. Every time you gotta give me some money, you know. And he's a West Sider. And his brother, I met Thurman through his brother Nelson, who was a singer, and quite a voice. Anybody that knows anything about Bill knows that he's a singer also. And I think he's passed the baton over to his son, because I hear his son singing one of his favorite songs. So the storm keeps on raging. My soul's been anchored in the Lord. Yeah, and that was one of Thurman's, when he was the choir director there at First 6th Street Baptist Church. I remember that under Ransom Howard. He was doing that. Been the mayor, this is his second term. Those of us that's old enough to remember, that was a time when African Americans were not a part of the city government, only Arthur Gibbery was. Dad was a part of the city government. But when things opened up and the Caucasians left the inner city of Port Arthur and left it to us, that's what they did. That's what they did when they built Jefferson Shopping Center on Charleston and Proctor. Man, when they started moving and migrating, I remember seeing old man Frank Bluestein sitting outside one of those places in Jefferson Shopping Center. And see, when Beaumont built Gateway, Port Arthur felt a need to have a shopping center here in Port Arthur, so they built Jefferson. Beaumont built Parkdale Mall, Port Arthur found a need to build Central Mall here in Port Arthur. So, unfortunately, fellas, you guys are still here in Port Arthur. I moved to Beaumont. Been in office. This is your second term, isn't it? Right. And National League of, he's a member of the National League of Cities since last year. Thurman was a justice of the peace in this area. I remember Thurman coming to Prairie View, and he was in the choir. He was in the bass. The Hanna family had swooped Thurman up, sent him to Commonwealth, I think was the school that you went to for mortuary science, wasn't it? Next thing I know, I'm coming back and Thurman is the director of funerals there, man, and at Hanna Funeral Home. He is a contributor, Chris got this, a contributor of songs, for which, like I said, he was known first of all as a mortician and then, but first of all a singer, then a mortician. He's a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. So I'm gonna call Thurman up, my guy, and Thurman, thank you so much, man, for your service. Yeah. We wanted to do something for you. I was thinking of someone to honor this year. We honored people last year, Marjorie Cole and Glenn Alexander Sr. and then Glenn Alexander II. We honored Major Goldman. So we were thinking about it. See, I hadn't planned to do this program this year, these guys from Mercy Lodge got me to doing this, and they're talking about something annual. Man, come on now. Somebody gonna have to do this. Somebody gonna have to do this. This is work. But anything, Trevor, you have anything you want to say? This?
Well, first I'd like to thank Mercy Lodge brothers for honoring me and presenting this plaque to me. This means the world to me. My late pastor, who actually like raised Dr. Ransom Howard, would say, Bill, you always have to show up when people want you, because it's gonna be a time when they're not gonna want you. You know, so as long as people want you, you got to make provision. So I had some other things to do today, and I said, well, Frog not gonna mind if I have this home, because I'm gonna be able to be there, because I told him, if I would end up working or something, I may not have a lot of time. Right. But I want to tell y'all one thing. I've been knowing Frog, better part of my life, because he was like one of the big boys living around the corner.
Right.
Like, I see Wilma here,
neighborhood.
Yeah, neighborhood. And we, growing up, you looked up to the older persons in your neighborhoods.
Right.
And being there, like they went to Lincoln. Wilma was a cheerleader or something. And we used to see y'all on Friday evenings. Y'all have your little outfits on, going to catch the bus to go to football games.
Yeah, right.
The girls wanted to be what they were.
Right.
Boys wanted to play football.
That's right.
Frog could sing. and Frog left, and every year from Carver School, we would go and be presented the concert by the Prairie View A&M Acapella Choir with Dr. H. Ellison Anderson.
Right.
And I remember when Mrs. Marjorie Gay, or Miss Marjorie Gay, who later became Miss Marjorie Cole, was the accompanist for Dr. Anderson.
That's right.
And then next thing I knew, she had a job. She graduated and had a job. Well, Frog graduated and he went to Prairie View.
Right.
And they came and they brought all the little kids from Carver.
Right.
And Frog stepped out to sing, and then and from a little bitty boy, I wanted to sing like Frog. And I'm gonna show you what God did. God can bless you to do, and say He'll give you the desires of your heart. This legacy. And the man gave me a sheet of music, and I read it, not the words, but I read the notes, because you have to sight read. And before, I guess the beginning of the semester was over, so I accomplished everything I needed right then, so I could go somewhere else after that.
And he did.
But that's how God blessed me. So Frog, I told you this before, I appreciate you, man. You've always been my musical idol, brother.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
And keep doing, I appreciate what you're doing now.
Okay.
All right?
You,
So, and thank you all. Thank you, gentlemen.
This is amazing.
All right.
You heard? Kind of gravelly. And he heard me talking to Flat Top, which was another nickname of a guy that hung around the YMCA. And see, the YMCA on the west side was a place that young people used as activities. There was pool tables there, there was ping pong that went on. They went there to play dominoes, and you became a member of the YMCA if you were a young person or an older person. And I remember Mr. Levy was the coordinator there. But this guy heard me talking, and that was a television program for children called Andy's Game with Andy Devine. There was a little frog puppet. His name was Froggy the Gremlin. And this guy heard me talking, and he told KJ told somebody else, "Hey man, listen to that youngster. He sounds just like Froggy the Gremlin." And so that name stuck with me, and the people who know me from back in the day. George and I, we started using our handles, our government names, when we got out of certain elements. We started, but see, George, the fellow that said he right there, me and Bill know him as Tip. That name has been there for years, hasn't it, George? In community service. When Krista typed up his credits, God have mercy, man. This man's credits was a page long. He was featured in the Port Arthur News not too very, very long ago. Classmate of mine. It seems as though the people that graduated Wilma in 1964 went on, some of us, to do some fantastic things. But I want to avoid John Como and read just a portion of some of the things this young man has done. I'm going to still follow the young man. He was the first black mechanical engineer at Texaco. He was the public works director at Port Arthur. He was Port Arthur's assistant city manager. He then became Port Arthur city manager. Port Arthur, Port Arthur Commission and president of that group. Port Arthur Board of Higher Education board member. Port Arthur Historical Society board member. Says, yeah, I'm about to use him. I've already plugged him. I've been trying to get in the Gulf Coast Museum as the only African-American classical singer from the city of Port Arthur. I'm thinking I'm the only classical singer, black or white, from the city of Port Arthur. But I've been trying to get in that museum because they've been placing people like Janis Joplin who talks really, really bad about the city of Port Arthur, you know, and some other people that I didn't think is worthy of their heritage. Cynthia's bowing her head back, shaking her head back. Cynthia, I'm so glad to see you, sweetie pie. I'm gonna get a chance to talk to you before you leave. But good, let's go on with her husband here. He is also 5 Points Credit Union's second vice president. He is ISTC board member and founder, Golden Triangle Business Roundtable Safety Committee founder, Contractor Safety Council of Southeast Texas board member and a founding member. It's always good to be a founding member of things, isn't it, John? Yeah. So when they mentioned it and they mentioned you,
I had a part in that.
yeah, you had a part in that.
Exactly.
You know, and I know what that feels like. I'm a founding member of a group in Houston called the Ebony Opera Guild and Chamber Choir, and they're still in existence there in Houston, and they still put on concerts periodically there in Houston. And I like that idea that I'm a founding member. It only makes me older too. So you made a black Christian background. We had these meetings. We're no longer a secret society, so don't think that about Masons, because Google killed all that. You know, if there's any question you want to find out about the Masonic order, just Google. You know, technology killed all of that secret society, man. John, you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, I just like to say thank you very much for recognizing me here. And you know, when I hear all these things that you're saying there, I know why I'm so tired. You know?
Right.
You know, class of 64, raise your hands, please. So we have a number of people here. Class of
Yeah,
64,
and a number of
yeah.
classmates here.
And Carver School, too. We all went to Carver School.
Carver School, that's
Carver
right.
School, that's right. That's where we got our beginnings, at
That's
Carver
right,
School.
that's right.
I mean, some things we learned there we're still using.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's
right, that's right.
nothing unusual about that. But Carver
Right.
School is a wonderful place to be.
That's
And
right.
Richard was west, like I say, west side. I'm 1400 West 8th Street. My wife is 901 West 8th Street. You're what?
1119 West 6th
1119,
Street.
and Wilma, yeah. Most of us were off the west side. So,
That's right,
Yeah, and I
that's
think we
right.
we did our best to make West Side proud.
That's
And,
right, that's right.
I'm very happy to accept this honor.
Yeah.
And yeah, after
Do that.
we were when I was at Prairie View, I got to tell one story on Richard. When at Prairie View, about my senior year, I was working part-time jobs and things like that, and I had a 1959 Ford
Right.
with full board, half rusted out. But I'll see Richard from time to time. He flag me down. Hey, I need a ride. I'm gonna hook you up with some gas. I'm still waiting to be hooked up. Thank you very much.
Sounds like you. Well, I had forgotten that. I want to have your wife, Brother Bigum, brought him to my attention. Arthur Guidry was really a cousin of mine. My grandmother was a Gibby before she got married. She became a Linden after she got married. And if you guys are familiar with Fellowship Baptist Church there on Thomas Boulevard, and I think that's 7th Avenue, Ronnie Linden is there. That's my uncle. My grandfather would periodically come by because he and my grandmother were still friends after they divorced. And my grandmother remarried, and so did he. And he would periodically bring these little babies by for my grandmother to see. And he would tell me and my brother, "This is your uncles." Well, I wasn't accustomed to little babies being my uncles. I'm a nephew to older people that may remember Big Ike Linden, who was one of the athletes and supervisors at Gulf baseball. There used to be a semi-pro team here in Port Arthur, called the Port Arthur Red Sox. And where Walgreens is, that was a baseball stadium there across the street it was. Arthur Guidry died some years ago, and he was the first black city councilman in Port Arthur. I don't know, John Sides may question that, because I think his dad was probably older than Arthur. And he was also a mayor pro tem. And I tried to have Krista to find out what mayor he was pro tem with. She didn't come up with the information. She's smiling at me now.
I always give honor to God. And I would like to thank everyone for recognizing my cousin. I used to come here and spend 1 month for the summer, 1 month in Rain, Louisiana, and then come back home a month before it was time to go back to school. But enjoyed myself when they were building that bridge right there by his house over on is it 6.5?
Yeah.
6.5. I used to ride my skateboard down there. So, yeah. So, but didn't get in any trouble. I was okay. But I just want to thank everybody from the city of Port Arthur. I come like I come twice a month now. I have a family member, Alex Tebow. He's in the hospital right now.
Right.
And Brother Bickham, Brother Gasper, and Brother Perkins are my Mason brothers. We're all a part of the Joshua Grand Lodge in Houston, Texas, and I am a member of Queen Esther Grand Chapter, Order of Eastern Star of Houston, Texas. Again, thanks everyone. Anybody that knew I call him Cousin Sonny. Anybody that knew Cousin Sonny. I came down here, me and my dad was 96, he was a Buffalo soldier. And when we would come down here to visit, there were no lights and no stop signs. In his eyes. There were plenty of them. But he never stopped at one. Not one. So every time I came back, I said, okay, I'm old enough to drive now. I'm driving you and Daddy around. So. But I did send you pictures. I sent you pictures of something that I have not a clue. Well, no, it was something about it with a gas station.
Gas station and
Cuomo's gas station. Okay, okay. So I have that picture in
That's
mind.
his family.
Okay.
The
Okay.
Cuomo.
that's John's family.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I love Port Arthur. Like I say, I'm here all the time, still looking for some more new restaurants because I am a foodie. So if anybody can tell me anything other than what was it, Seaside Seafood and Wheelhouse and Hamilton. Oh, I'm known at Hamilton. So.
It's like paparazzi central.
Right. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. The program of the history of the Negro spirituals is a thing that's near and dear to my heart, because in the latter years of this life of mine, I found a necessity to sing these songs. How these songs got them through a very dark period of the history of our people here in this country. I'm not going to politicize and talk too much about slavery. Negro spirituals are not sung so much. You hear them in gospel music, which is a different idiom totally. And now with I call them gymnastics. The vocal gymnastics that go on when they sing now. One word may last 15 minutes because they do so. That may be an exaggeration, but to a singer like me, who sings songs as they were composed, I hear the national anthem, man, and it takes on so many different hues and colors, and if you heard it done nationally. I sang the national anthem for the Colorado Rockies inaugural season, at 30,000 people in the stands. I sang it like it was written, Joe. Not like I would do in the shower, you know. But if you listen at some of these songs, some of these spirituals that's sung now, that's been rearranged by different arrangers. I try and stick to the Harry T. Burley arrangement of the Negro spirituals. He was a musician, a church musician, and a graduate of a vocal college of vocal music.
You want to play it now? Or are you
Go right
interested?
on.
Okay.
Yeah, go right on.
As part of the Celebrate Stafford 350th anniversary celebration, a motor coach tour explored the trail to freedom. At Chatham, visitors toured the grounds and heard the stories that impacted the many Stafford residents of African descent. These included John Washington, whose life was depicted by professional musician and actor Elliot Dash, who also joined performer Jim Thomas for a concert on the lawn in Chatham.
And go home to my Lord and be free. Jim Thomas is a graduate of Fisk University in Tennessee. He was a member of the Fisk Jubilee Singers. Perhaps some of you saw the Fisk Jubilee Singers when we brought them here a couple of years ago, performed at University of Mary Washington to a full house, over 1,000 people in attendance. But Jim has taken that as one of his life's missions, the understanding of the music that was sung by slaves and their descendants. Deep with meaning, sprinkled with symbolism that mattered a great deal to those slaves, a source of comfort and joy and hope.
I want to just spend a bit time with you on the brilliance of the slaves who created the slave songs, later known as the spirituals, and talk about that context, which is rarely talked about. The first group of slaves arrived in the U.S. here in Virginia in 1619. They were driven to communicate with each other. What the slave owners didn't get right away, thankfully, is that in Africa, all information is virtually sung in one of three styles. The first style you're very familiar with, caller response. I say, hello, and you say, caller response. Then there is the syncopated. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. So the song begins one beat into the measure, syncopated. So that's two styles. And then the third style is the slow, gradual opening chord. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. No call, no response, just a gradual opening chord. Got it?
The early 70s. But anyway, you see what this guy is talking about, how the Negro spiritual got started. And I believe that to be so. This rendition of his, it goes on, if you're interested in seeing it in its entirety, it goes about 30 minutes. His presentation about the Negro spiritual, he sings, and then he has another gentleman that sings. If he was a part of the Jubilee Singers, then yes, he's a singer. But some of his analogies of the Negro spirituals and the meaning, the symbolic meaning, some of these things I question. So that's why I stopped it there, because he mentions two famous spirituals that was associated with the Underground Railroad and the journey, the trails to freedom that was conducted by Harriet Tubman. She was one of the conductors of the Underground Railroad. And he mentions two Negro spirituals that I love. I sing both of them, just a little bit of this. Because I know some of you come here to hear me sing. Didn't come here to hear me talk. But I sing this song, and it's Israel was in Egypt's land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in the Egypt's land, tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. They gave Harriet Tubman the name, the first name that she was labeled by was Moses. Later on, because you know they put a price tag on her head, and they was never able to capture her. And during the Civil War, she became a scout, a spy for the Union soldiers. And like I said, she was instrumental in bringing at least 300 slaves out of bondage into the North. And when they said the North, they didn't stop in New York, or they went on to Canada. Because I found out, when I left Prairie View, John, on a young artist program and went to New York City, first of all, it was a culture shock for me, because we hadn't been to New York when we traveled. I've traveled with the Prairie View Acapella Choir, and we did that. I did that for 4 years. And we would go to various places. We would go to the Middle East, we would go to the Midwest, we'd go to the East Coast, and then we would go to the West Coast. Each year we'd pick one of these areas. And so that was always a thing, but and I've forgotten my thought. What was my thought? Low-income housing apartments in Queens. And so being a college student, I hadn't even got my diploma yet. John, like I left Prairie View before they even passed out the degrees. I got the first performance degree that Prairie View offered. And so I was chosen to go to New York City and see New York City Opera Company as a young artist. It was a feeder program for the Metropolitan. And that was my dream, to sing in the Metropolitan Opera House. And that didn't happen, but I was blessed to do some other things as a product of my being there in New York. But Fred Trump and them had just built these low-income housing apartments. So I went and applied. They turned me down because I was African American. They got sued. They settled out of court. I didn't leave Queens. I went to Flushing's, which is another community, another annex of Queens, because there's Jamaica, Queens, and there's Flushing. I was not too far from Flushing Meadows, where they play the United States tennis tournament. I could hear them when the tournament would be going on. But anyway, that was a culture shock for me. I thought that racism, I had left racism because I was raised in Port Arthur, during Jim Crow, during segregation. We were just talking about it, L.D. Ray and I was just talking about it. Unless you was a domestic worker in Port Arthur, at a certain time of night, you best not be caught on what they label as the East Side, which really wasn't East, but they labeled it as the East Side. If you got caught over there, you may have some problems with D.P. Moore and that group, because they was picking black people up and they would disappear, some of them, you know. And but if you were a domestic worker, you lived in an alley. They called it living on premises. You lived in an alley, and behind where your parent worked as a domestic worker, be a maid, a cleaning lady, or a cook, you know. So anyway, that's what happened with Harriet Tubman, and when she would bring slaves to like Delaware or New York, the slave catchers were still running around catching slaves and bringing them back to the South. Texas is notorious. That's why Gail Pelham, I'm so happy that Gail Pelham is interested in keeping that Juneteenth thing on. 1865, the Texans, the slaves that was here in Texas, found out that the Emancipation Proclamation had been written 2.5 years prior to that, you know. And what was happening, the slave owners in Texas knew that the proclamation had been written. They were letting slaves out to the southern states, some of the coastal states, to the slave owners there that had lost their slaves. And why it was such a problem for them, why they were in such opposition to enough to go to war with each other. Some of them was family members that was on different sides of the fence. Some that didn't want slavery and thought that it was an abomination, and some of those that wanted slavery because it was an economical tool that they had to use. And I thought about that. I said, man, it's almost like that today, Bill. It's almost like that today, because if you see tapings of the people in, what was that, Charlotte, North Carolina, and they were saying, you will not replace me. Well, what are they talking about? And when Donald Trump talked about make America great again, what segment of America are you talking about making great again? You know, it's had different suits of clothing. Somebody's clapping over here. That came across with the Middle Passage, with the slaves that they brought from West Africa. Some of those rhythms and melodies are still prevalent in hip hop music. I had a thing that I was doing. I've got a song that's called Cinnamon Save, which is an old Nina Simone song. Cinnamon, cinnamon, where you gonna run to? Cinnamon, cinnamon, where you gonna run to? Cinnamon, cinnamon, where you gonna run to? On Judgment Day, on Judgment Day. I wanted to play that as people came in today. With a certain background, there's chaotic stuff going on with this song. But I used that arrangement of Nina Simone, kind of changed it around. I put a part of a Porgy and Bess in it. It ain't necessarily so. No, it ain't necessarily so. The things that you're liable to read in the Bible, they ain't necessarily so. And he was talking about longevity. And little did he know, a week or two later, somebody ended his existence. But he lives on in here. And as long as we pass the message on, that's why, Brother Ray, it's so important that we practitioners and singers keep the Negro spiritual alive, and black music alive. And I'm not talking about popular music only. There's some of us that love it. When I lived in New York, man, I hung out in Greenwich Village. I didn't hang out in Harlem. And during the time when I was in New York, it was right at the ending time of the beatniks. And there were so many of those guys, man, that were poets. Like the last poets, Leroy Jones, he's in Mary Baharaka now. And Gil Scott Heron was the last poets, man. These guys was in Greenwich Village. And those are the musicians. I heard musicians like Miles Davis and Fathead Newman, and who came here, lived in Dallas. You know, just people in general that has kept the genres alive. I see on Facebook now, they list a lot of the old jazz artists. When we did the 50-year anniversary in Memphis about the garbage man strike that Martin Luther King was there for, we celebrated that in Memphis. You know, they've converted the Lorraine Motel into a museum now. And if you get a chance to go through Memphis, please go by the Lorraine Motel to the Civil Rights Museum there, and you'll see the actual room that Martin Luther King and his entourage, some of his entourage stayed in. He was an avid smoker, or someone was, because there's an ashtray there that's full of cigarette butts. So, but anyway, those kinds of things for the Negro spirituals, that's why I do what I'm doing. That's why when I get a chance to sing, I go to Wesley Methodist Church there in Beaumont. And it's a predominantly Caucasian community there in that particular congregation. And when I'm given the opportunity to sing there, I normally choose a Negro spiritual. One year I informed the congregation there that we share, African Americans and Caucasians share a spiritual called Amazing Grace. When Newton heard the slaves in the bow of his ship moaning the melody, which is a West African sorrow chant, he put some words to it. Now there's another version of that particular song that's set to the tune of Danny Boy. There's that version of Amazing Grace. Then there's Amazing Grace that has the melody of the West Africans. And if you're familiar with Whitney Phelps, African-American singer who sings gospel music, you can hear him talk about the Amazing Grace and how that song came about and how Newton, the author, was a captain on a slave vessel. And I knew it already. There's a scale in music called the diatonic scale. Negro spirituals, you can play any Negro spiritual, most of them, on the black keys of the piano. Any of them. And he mentioned that in one of his presentations at a church. And it made me think about that diatonic scale. We don't use it much, you know. We be musicians, those of us that can play piano. I'm not one of those. They ask me when I say I'm a musician, they ask me, what instrument do you play? I tell them, I say, I play God's instrument. I point to my throat. And a few years ago I had pneumonia and they had to intubate me and place a tube down my throat. And I was in ICU for 17 days. Twister doesn't get many accolades. We sing together, do duets together over at Westby. I'm a poor pilgrim of sorrow. I'm tossed in this wide world alone. All hope have I for tomorrow. I'm going to heaven, my home. Sometimes I'm tossed and troubled, Lord. Sometimes I don't know where to roam. But I've heard of a city called heaven. I'm going to make it my home. My mother, she died in pure glory. My father, he died in sin. My brothers and sisters won't own me because I'm trying to get in. Sometimes I'm tossed and troubled, Lord. Sometimes I don't know where to roam. But I've heard of a city called heaven. I'm going to make it my home.